Okay guys, we're ready. Here we go. Yeah, it's been a long time. Today I have a long story to tell you guys. I'm on the Isle of Wight at the moment. I thought it's New Year's Day, and I thought I'll come to the Isle of Wight because I just had enough of hanging around in London. The energies in London just became too much for me. So I had to do a runner and kind of take to the sticks, clear my energies once again, and ground myself so that I can come back to what's real. Because when I'm in London, it's really difficult to differentiate the difference in between what's real and what's not anymore. And I noticed it's already been 2 years. Sorry, it's already been 2 days I've been on the Isle of Wight, and my energy is totally transformed. I feel totally different, and I can feel myself again. I feel great, and I have to do this every now and then to remind myself how beautiful life actually is. But when I'm in London, I just don't get that connection to life anymore. London is finished, it's done. And I can imagine it's pretty much the same for most big cities or areas of population, like densely populated areas. It's over. It's no longer possible to feel yourself there anymore. Anyway, today I'm going to be talking about what happened to the gnostic takeover. So, for those of you who may know me from the gnostic takeover, obviously you know who I am. Don't have to introduce myself to you, but for new listeners, my name is Errol Kaya. I'm one of the founders of the Gnostic Takeover channel on YouTube, which is no more to be. And I'm going to tell the story today because the last video, I believe, which was aired on Gnostic Takeover, was April 2024. Steve did one last video, I believe, and since then he's been pretty silent, and I have some concerns for him. Well, I don't want to jump to speculation, but if I'm to know Steve, it may not be pretty good for him at the moment, and he may not even be with us anymore. But I don't want to speculate. So what I'll do is I'll tell my story, because for every story there's two versions, two sides to every story. What you guys have been hearing till now is just one side of the story, single-sided, Steve's side of the story. So now I want you to hear mine so that you guys can make your minds up about what happened to the Gnostic Takeover. And it's not to say that I'm the one telling the truth, or Steve is the one telling the truth, or whatever. I'm just going to tell the story of what I experienced in my near enough 2 years in Austria, and what happened to me, because a lot of you guys who were following the Gnostic Takeover in between the years of 2021 and 2022, 2020 and 2022, I believe you've been wondering what's happened to me. Well, that's why I'm going to tell you my story. I'm going to tell you what happened. So I'll begin from August 2020, when I first landed in Austria. Obviously, after all the calamities of 2020, what happened, lockdown and everything, I was laid off. I had no job. I had an Austrian friend, and he was the one who invited me over to Austria. He told me that he would move back to Austria since he didn't feel safe in England, and he asked me for a hand to help him to move back to Austria. So I said to him, yeah, I'll help you, no problem. So we moved him over, and we spent 3 days there, and then we had to come back to London to finalize everything before he was to come back again to Austria to never return to England. And that was the time I would ride to Austria with him on my motorcycle. So he rode to Austria on his motorcycle and me on mine, together obviously. It's a beautiful ride. And I was never to ride back. I didn't know that I wasn't gonna ride back. So I got to Austria, and the plan was that I would stay in Austria for 3 weeks and return back to England. But that just didn't happen because we started hiking over the Alps and trekking, and I just fell in love with the mountains, you know. I just fell in love with the Alps. I just couldn't get enough of it. And before I knew it, it was 1 month, 2 months have gone by, and I was still in Austria, literally just living on the Alps, just one mountain after the other. We were walking over mountains like they were nothing, and we were living on the mountains as well. We had our sleeping bags and everything, and we were camping out overnight, waking up in the morning, walking through the day to another peak. I just fell in love with the mountains, and what this mountaining began to do to me was build my strength, power and energy, and my life force in my body was increasing. So there was, returning back to England anytime soon was not in my mind. It was just not an option for me, because what was I going to do back in England? I was laid off from my job. There were no jobs going because of what was going on, and we all know what was happening, right? So I might as well have stayed in Austria and enjoyed. So that's exactly what I was doing. However, reality began to kick in after 2.5 months that I should return back to England. And in that time, my friend, I won't use his name now, he may not be happy, so you know, just for privacy, I'm not going to use his name. He said to me that there's a demonstration in the city of Linz in Austria, and that there was a guy speaking there at the demonstrations. Obviously this was anti, you know, there's some words I don't want to use here now because of YouTube censorship, so bear with me, yeah? But you get what I mean, you know. This was an anti-demonstration, and there was a guy speaking there. He told me that this guy is pretty popular in Austria. He told me that he's the Austrian version of David Icke, actually. And I was like, really? Okay. Let's go check him out. So we went over to the first demonstration, and bear in mind, Austria is a very peaceful place where people conform to authority unquestionably. Whatever the government says, they do it. It doesn't matter how out far it is or how right or wrong it is. Without question, they will just do it. And when you approach them and say, why are you doing this? Don't you think what the government is doing wrong? They'll look at you like you're some kind of an alien, and they'll, you know, it's kind of like, what do you mean? What are we doing? This is what the government tells us to do. That's why we do it. Government says so, so we have to do it. And it's like, but well, this is morally wrong. Don't you think to yourself that this is morally wrong? They don't see it that way. It's just if the government says so. If the government says you have to walk off a cliff and kill yourself, they will do it. They were so conformative until what happened in 2020. Until the demonstrations began, which this guy was a part of. This guy was Stephen Weiber, the guy we formed the Gnostic Takeover channel with. So we met Steve, and obviously things started happening after that. We started to meet more people. Before we knew it, all of a sudden, knew so many people, and I began to think to myself, if I go back to England, what am I going to do in England? Who's in England? Everything is happening here in Austria. So if I go back to England, what am I going to do? It was looking more and more like I wouldn't return back to England anytime soon, and I would continue staying in Austria. So, yeah, we met all these beautiful people, and they started inviting us over to their houses, like for meals, for drinks, and you know, just to socialize, and it was good. But something in me was still, my brain was saying, you got to go back to England, Errol, you know, because you don't belong here. You don't belong here. You just got to go back to England. But my heart was saying, no, you got to stay here. So I was in kind of like a tug of war between my mind and my heart. There was like a tug of war going on. And I finally decided, okay, I'm going to go back to England. I said to myself, I'm going to go back to England next Sunday. And that was it, because all my savings, they were all running out. And I literally had nothing left. So I was going to have to go back sooner or later, because I didn't have working permission in Austria. I didn't even speak the language. What would I do? But then Stephen Wybrow would call me exactly on the evening before the day I would leave for England. Just before I went to bed, Stephen Wybrow called me, and he told me that Age of Truth is here in Austria, and they want to do an interview with you, like with me. I said to him, what? They want to do an interview with me? Why would they want to do an interview with me for? And he said, well, I told them about your work with shamanism and what you've done with shamanism, and they were interested in interviewing you. So I would come to Vienna tomorrow if I were you, he said to me, because tomorrow night there's an interview with Claire Edwards, myself, and you. We've planned this. So don't go anywhere. Don't go back to England. Come to Vienna. Because I was in Salzburg, right? So I was like, oh, fuck, what am I going to do now? My heart was saying to me, look, man, you got to stay here, yeah? Because this is a calling. You know this is a calling. This is a part of your work. But my mind was telling me, no, don't be stupid. Go back to England. Because what are you going to do here? You know, you've got no money. You don't have anywhere to stay properly. Yes, okay, you know some people, but you only just met them, you know. They're not your family, and you can't just rely on people. But then Stephen Wybrow was so persuasive, and he somehow convinced me that I should stay. And he was promising me, don't worry, man, you know, don't worry about the money. What we're going to do is we're going to set up a website, and then we're going to get like donations, and we're going to get like subscriptions. It's going to be our own platform, and all these promises. He started bombarding me with all these promises. And I was like, this hit the right spot for me. So I agreed, and I said, you know what? Sorry, I'm not going back to England tomorrow morning. I'm getting on my bike and I'm riding to Vienna. So that's exactly what I did. The following day, instead of going this way, I went that way, further into Austria to Vienna. So another 3 hours away, 3 hours ride away. By the evening of the next day, I was in Vienna, and I was meted and greeted by Lucas Alexandra of Age of Truth TV on YouTube, and obviously Steve Wybrow was there. Claire Edwards was there as well, and immediately we started preparations for the interview, and that was 2020 Halloween. That was, we did our first ever interview, and it was for Age of Truth TV. What was the name? I think it was something to do with Trump. The Trump card. Age of Truth TV, the Trump card. So you can go and look that video up on YouTube. It's still there. Actually, I've got 2 videos with that. I've got 2 interviews with the Age of Truth, because we were to do another one the following day as well, which only involved me. Lucas Alexandra was interviewing me. It was just me. But the first one we did that day was the 3 of us. Claire Edwards, Steve, and me. And it was all good, you know. And after that, we went out for a meal, we celebrated, and everything was good. And Steve was talking about how he's going to set up a platform, and, you know, for us, and that I should stay, and I shouldn't worry about accommodation or anything. I shouldn't worry about money. Everything is set, and we've got some good work to do together, you know, because we're gonna end this crisis, right? That was the story. So that's what happened. I didn't return to England, and I had to somehow explain to my family that, hey, you know, I'm not coming back to England yet. I'm still going to be here. I don't know when I'm returning, but I'm here for now, so I hope you guys understand. I just had to let everything go. That was a very big turning point for me in my life, because I just had to, my mind was screaming at me, you can't do this, man, be sensible. But my heart was saying, no, you got to stay right here, because you know you're supposed to be here right now. And that was when I really, really, really had to trust myself with the source of creation, because I was guided to be there, and that's why I was there. And it was amazing how everything was happening all synchronistically, right? Or one after the other. Everything was falling into place to make sure that I didn't return to England, and I remained in Austria. And obviously back then, Austria was, no, the United Kingdom was a part of Europe. It was part of the European Union, and there was no problem. I could stay there as much as I want. And the Austrian government didn't have a problem with it, because I wasn't considered an illegal alien until the Brexit happened in 2020-21. Now, when that happened, everything changed, but I'll get there. So, as time went on, I met an amazing woman, and yeah, she's still in my life, thank God, and I'll call her my angel. Now, if I was back in England, this would never happen, but in Austria this did, you know, and this was another good thing that happened in my life, from following my heart and choosing to stay in Austria. I met who I call my angel, and she's been so great to me, and she actually, I'll get to her later on in the story, but 2021 happened, and Brexit happened, and immediately after that, the Austrian government came after me, and they took my passport. Now, they took me into prison, and I said to them, what's going on? And they said, we're going to deport you, you don't belong here, you can't be here. And I was like, well, hold on a minute. I'm not going anywhere yet, just like that. I've been here for a while. I've got things going on here. I'll go, but just not now. They didn't listen, obviously. So what happened was, they put me into prison one night. And then I said to them, what's going to happen? They said to me, well, we're going to deport you. I said to them, okay then, well, can't I stay here? And then somebody said to me that you can seek asylum. So that's exactly what I did. I sought asylum, and I ended up in an asylum camp, and they told me that they have to re-arrest me and go through the whole process again. And then finally they sent me to the asylum camp, which was a concentration camp anyway. And I said to them, look, listen, I'm not going back to England, and I'm not staying here either, because they were trying to put me through all the measures, the regulations they had back then with the obviously with the swab test and all this nonsense. So I used that time to write a long letter to the Austrian authorities and to the establishment through the Austrian authorities, and it was a very heavy letter, and I basically explained to them how their system works, and I said to them, if you don't understand what this means, it's your duty to pass it on to your superior, and if they don't understand what this means, it's their responsibility to pass it on to their superior and further up the chain of command, until it eventually reaches someone who does understand what I'm talking about. And trust me, they will, I said to them. And in this letter I had everything. I explained to them what, I even explained to them what, I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to say this on YouTube, but I explained to them what terrorism is. I explained to them who runs the show. I explained to them everything. I just don't want to say it right now on YouTube, because I've only just started up my channel. I don't want it cancelled straight away immediately. So I am going to set up alternative platforms so that I can be more precise for anyone who wants to hear the story in full detail. For anyone who wants to hear the story uncensored, because I'm having to censor this for YouTube, just leave me a comment in the comment section. Just say I want to hear the story, and I'll get back to you. You know, I'll give you a link. Anyway, after some arguments in the asylum camp, Stephen Wybrow came with some other friends, and they insisted that I do not. I leave and I do not stay there. So the police was called. The police came, and the police, funny enough, said, "Oh, this has nothing to do with us now. You know, this is beyond us. So we're leaving. It's up to you guys." And we were like, "Okay, that's fine with us." So they didn't argue with me, and they allowed me to leave that day. However, they didn't give my documents to me. And I told them, what about my documents? I need my passport. What am I going to do without a passport? That's my ID. I'm already a fugitive here in this country. So how's that going to work out? Right? And they said to me, okay, next week on Monday, you can go to our office in the city of Linz, and you can pick it up from there. You can pick your documents up from there. And I was like, okay, I'll do that then. So I left that day thinking nothing of it. So a week passed, and I went to collect my documents from their office in Linz as they instructed me. And they told me that they don't have them. They're still waiting. So weeks went past. Many weeks went past, and I was still chasing after my passport, and they were still giving me the same story. So finally I called up the British Embassy in Vienna, and the British Embassy told me there's nothing they can do either, because I have to go to their office in Linz and I have to show them my ID so that they can give me back my passport. And I said to them, but they've got my ID. This is all about my ID. And they've got my ID. I'm going to them to get my ID back. So how am I supposed to show them my ID to get my ID? It doesn't make sense. You're not making any sense. And the British Embassy was like, well, there's nothing we can do. This is the procedure and this is what you got to do. So obviously it turns out that the British Embassy and the Austrian government are together. They're all in it together, working hand in hand. No surprise. So I became a fugitive. And obviously as days went on, and we did videos for the Gnostic Takeover, week after week, month after month with Stephen Wybrow, and we spoke about detailed things and laid it down. Obviously, it didn't look good for him. Things weren't looking good for me. And apparently what the Austrian government did was they sent me a letter, which was a decision on behalf of the Austrian government, telling me that I must return to England. And I only have up to a certain date. If I don't leave by this date, I'm going to be arrested. But that letter came to Steve's family's home address, and Steve received it. But Steve didn't tell me. What Steve told me was, the way Steve told me was, well, I've got good news for you, Errol. I received a letter from the Austrian police, and they've cleared you. You've got nothing to worry about. You're more than welcome to stay here. They haven't got nothing on you now. Don't worry about it. You're here. That was what Steve said to me. And every time I asked Steve to see that letter, he came up with an excuse not to show me that letter, because it turned out that he was lying. That letter was to tell me that I'm not welcome to stay in Austria and that I must leave. But Steve was telling me that I'm cleared and I've got nothing to worry about. And I knew he was bullshitting. And this caused a little bit of tension between us. And it was more like, Steve was like, why don't you believe me? Why don't you trust me? We've got some trust issues here, Errol, don't you think? Why should I hide things from you? And I was trying to tell him, Steve, if that's the case, yeah, then why can't you just show me the letter? Well, I don't know where I put it. I put it in the file. I went through it the other day. I couldn't find it. It was coming up with so many excuses. I said to him, Steve, look, that letter's from me, my friend, yeah? That's why I'm asking to see it. I have to see it. It's from me. And then he took it personal. Even though he was lying about the letter, he took it personal. He played the victim. And this caused a bit of tension between us. So he demanded that one day we should do a Zoom call and have a meeting together. I believe Ahmed Hashimi, back in the day, my good friend Ahmed Hashimi, Steve, and myself, the three of us, we should do a Zoom call and we should talk about this and we should clear things. And Ahmed and I were like, yeah, cool, why not? Let's do it. So we did it because back then I was somewhere else. I wasn't with Steve anymore. I was somewhere else helping some other guy out to apparently build his retreat. It was an ayahuasca retreat. And he wanted me there to run ceremonies for him. So that's why I was with that guy and I wasn't with Steve anymore. So Steve had a bit of a problem with me because of that as well. Because he was that kind of character, jealous. Yeah, so what happened was we did that Zoom call, and for anyone who's seen that Zoom call, that was supposed to be a private Zoom call. But us being us, trusting Steve as a friend, obviously, Steve used that against us and he made it public. It's on the Gnostic Takeover channel. It's a Zoom call, and I believe he titled that video something like, what was it? Mind controlling psychopaths at work or something like that. So apparently Ahmed and I were trying to mind control him and convince him of something that wasn't, when it was the other way round. But whatever. And we had a fallout with Steve because of this, and we didn't speak for months because it wasn't in him to come forward and accept things for what they were and talk things out. So he chose to run away. He chose to run away, and that's exactly what he did. Didn't see Steve for about 5 to 6 months after that. But meanwhile, a lot of things happened. I obviously ended up homeless, and there was a point I lived in the Alps. There was a point I lived in a hut. There was a point I lived with Chris. I had a friend called Chris. For anyone who remembers, we used to refer to him as the wizard, the young little wise wizard. Chris is a very good friend. I spent some time with him in the mountains, but there was many times I was alone, and I literally lived in the Alps through the summer, into the autumn, into the winter, into the spring again. I went through the seasons in the Alps, weathering the conditions of the Alps. It was an amazing experience, I tell you. And I remember sleeping in caves, and all I had was a -10 sleeping bag, pair of jeans, a coat, pair of boots, just as I went there, you know, and nothing else. And a razor blade to shave with, and no food. So I was catching my own food. There was beautiful trout, river trout, and I remember casting nets from one end of the river to the other side, tying one end of the net on something on one side of the river, and coming back and holding it. And I remember catching trout, and I used to take them back up to the cave, get a fire going, and cook them. So when I was able to catch trout, I enjoyed some trout. But when there wasn't, I went for days without food. And the good thing is, the body gets used to it. And I used to wake up in the mornings. I used to make my way down the mountain, freezing cold, icicles hanging outside, you know, the mouth of the cave. And I used to walk down the mountain to the river. I used to break the ice, and I used to go in the water, and I used to sit in that water for 5 minutes, and I used to shave my head with the razor blade. And then I used to come out, do some squats in the body weighted squats in the snow, and then I used to do some push-ups in the snow, and then I used to dry up. Then I used to get dressed, put my socks on, put my boots on, and then as I climbed up the mountain, I began to warm up again. And when my fingers got my grip back, I used to find a branch and I used to do some pull-ups. And by the time I got up to the cave again, I was feeling warm again, and I used to burn the wood in the cave to make a fire to keep warm. Well, I used to go out and I used to gather some more wood. I used to gather wood every day to pile it up here. I used to pile that cave up with wood, so there was an endless supply of wood in that cave, firewood, so that I would make sure that I've always had enough firewood for the nights. Because before I used to sleep, I used to build a fire, and then I used to fall asleep with the fire going. So obviously, by the time I used to wake up in the morning, the fire was dead and everything was freezing cold again, but it didn't matter. I became so strong. I mean, how could I explain? Our bodies are designed to withstand, to adapt and to withstand such extremes. It's unimaginable. And Wim Hof, for anyone who knows Wim Hof, he's a prime example. This guy, he's all about this. He's all about he's all about he's all about the cold. He's all about ice baths. And that's exactly how I was living on the Alps. Ice baths every day. And I was living in the cold every day. I didn't have any luxuries. I didn't have my morning coffee. I didn't have nothing. And I learned something. I didn't even have internet. I didn't even have mobile phone connection. I didn't have battery to charge my mobile phone. It was just with me in my rucksack somewhere. I couldn't use it. Who was I going to call? I had such an amazing connection with the land and nature, that one night I was sleeping in a cave, and I received a healing on my lower jaw, which came from the land. It came from the natural intelligence of the earth. And right here, my lower jaw, I was in my sleep, I was shown how the healing was taking place. How can I explain? If you've ever seen the movie Avatar, there's a scene where they lay the bodies down on the ground and they're brought back to life. It was something like that, like a neural network connecting with me, and information was coming through, it was like codes, which was instructing my bottom jawline to heal. Because before I came to Austria, I had a cavity problem in one of my teeth here. So what happened was, that night in the cave, sleeping in the cave, just by sleeping in the cave, I got a healing in my tooth, my lower jaw, and I've never had to go to the dentist ever since. This stuff is real. So this is a connection, a natural connection that I had when I was living in the Alps in Austria. Yeah. And you know, I learned one thing from that experience. We don't need anything. Everything we have in the modern world, all the luxuries, we have a stupid job because we think we need to earn money so that we can buy stupid things we don't need, so that we can pay for our food and all this stuff. We don't need it, man. I mean, I had nothing, and I was happy because I was in nature. But if I had nothing and I was in a city, I was in the heart of civilization, I'd be very unhappy. That's the difference. When you have nothing but you're in nature, you're the happiest person. And this is our natural state. This is our natural state. We've lost it. But the problem today is, okay, I ain't got a problem with living like that. And I'm more than happy to going back to live like that. But here's the problem. If I do that, I'd have to do it alone. Nobody else in the world will follow me. Because everybody's used to their luxuries. Nobody's going to give it up. So that's not possible. So somehow we still have to find a balance, and we have to come back into so-called civilization and blend in and live the fake life and adapt and adjust. But I just want to say that I've been privileged to see the other side of the coin, which is we don't need none of it. And I know that I can do with none of it. So that's why now, if my life falls apart, if my life ever does fall apart, I don't care. Because I know I can do anyway. But most people's problem is they don't know that they can do without. Right? They think that if they lose their job, if they lose this, if they lose that, it's the end of the world. Because they haven't seen the other side of the coin. So I just happen to be one of those people who have seen the other side of the coin. Now, I'm not saying to anyone, drop what you have now, quit what you're doing now, and just go and live like that. That's not what I'm saying, and that's not what we should do. What I'm saying is, know that all this is bullshit that we're engaging in. That's all I'm saying. But guess what? Let's all engage in it while it lasts, because it ain't gonna last for long. It's an artificial system this is we're living in, and anything that which is artificial is not sustainable by nature and has to have an end. It's not infinite, it's finite. It has an expiry date, And the expiry date of this civilization is it's due. So bear that in mind. But this isn't bad news, this is good news, because this marks the beginning of a new paradigm and the end of an old. We're in the midst of a paradigm shift now. So there's a split taking place. So the people who are waking up and smelling the coffee, they're moving into the new paradigm, which a lot of things are going to become possible. Collaboration is going to be very big. People are going to come together in union, in collaboration, to build many good things together and find many new ways of doing things which work for everybody, not just for the few. And the old paradigm is going to descend into what it already is. It's just going to get even worse, and eventually it's going to destruct and self-destruct and cease to exist. So back to Austria. That's where we were. Let's not go off subject, yeah? Let's not go off topic. Back to Austria. Eventually what happened was I was on and off between living in the Alps, living in a hut with my friend Chris, and that's how I was living. So what happened was Chris one day he came to see me in the mountains, and he said to me, "Listen, man, Liz got in touch with me, Liz Stadler, and you know she lives in St. Corona. There's a place called St. Corona in Austria. It's a beautiful place in the mountains. It's a little town. It's not even a town. It's a village with 6 to 8 houses in it and a church, and it's situated right on the verge of a valley, and there's mountains everywhere. It's beautiful. It's like fairy tale land." And Chris said to me, "Liz has invited us to go to St. Corona because they want to build a yurt. They want to build a Mongolian yurt so that they can do ceremonies in, and they're looking for someone to do ceremonies as well. So Errol, you're the guy. So they're inviting us to St. Corona." So I said to Chris, "Yeah, okay, let's go and see them. Let's see what this is all about. Let's find out." So we did, and for anybody who knows the story from there, that was a very interesting story. The guy turns out to be, well, I don't want to say on YouTube now. I'm pretty much limited to what I can say, but he wasn't who he said he was. Obviously, we went to St. Corona. Liz introduced us to a guy named Francie, and this Francie was just someone who was living in the house, which was pretty much connected. It was connected to a church, and that was the only church in town, in the village. And he was kind of like a farmer, like a hippie farmer guy. And he came across as friendly, and he was friendly. He invited us, he allowed us to stay there. And we ended up staying there for some weeks. And we built a yurt together in the garden there, in the house, on the property. We built a yurt. And that was a good experience as well, building a yurt. And we started doing some ceremonies in that yurt. Now, there are plenty of videos on the Gnostic Takeover about this, on this topic, on what happened in St. Corona. So I'm not going to go into the details now. But for anyone who wants to find out, you can watch the videos on the Gnostic Takeover and get your take. Don't hear it from me. You know, I would like to go into the depths of the story. I feel like I'm not doing you guys justice here, but I really have to watch what I say, since a lot of things have happened since, and I'm getting there. So after all the things that happened in St. Corona, and St. Corona came to an end and it was no more to be, we had to escape. We had to run from St. Corona. And whoa, that was some crazy experience. And by the way, I'm in the process of writing a book, and I'm going to put all this stuff in my book as well. I've decided to put all this stuff in my book, because the book is going to be about the new paradigm and how we're going to be living in abundance in the new paradigm. And it's going to be based on natural law principles. So I'm thinking of titling the book The Natural Law Principles of Abundance, or something on those lines. I haven't made up my mind yet fully, but I'm going to put everything in the book. I'm going to put what happened to me in Mexico and what happened to me in Peru in the Amazon rainforest. I'm going to put all those experiences. I'm going to put also what happened to me in Austria. I'm going to sum it all up, and I'm going to tell my story, because my story is a perfect, how can I say, it's a perfect build-up for what is to come. So when people read it, they're going to have more clarity on, where things are going, where things are leading. But the book mainly is going to be about abundance and how we live in abundance and how we can tap into it. And obviously there's going to be a financial aspect of the book as well, which I'm going to talk about business and the coming new ways of how business is going to be conducted in the future, how we're going to be able to build our own economies, have our own communities, and live in abundance as nature intended us to do in the first place. So that's what the book is going to be all about. But I'm putting all of this stuff in the book. I'm not going to hold back. When it comes to the book, I'm not holding back, because they can't censor my book. It's my book. I'm writing it. I'm going to self-publish it. It's my book. But here I have to be careful what I say. So, after what happened in St. Corona, I'll skip that part. For anyone who wants to know more about it, leave a comment in the comment section and see what I can do. But after St. Corona, we were pretty much homeless, and it was only just, I was back with Steve again, because he came back. Because what happened was, when we were in St. Corona, I almost had an argument with Liz and Chris, because they insisted that Steve would also join us as well. And I was trying to explain to them, look, I don't think Steve is ready yet for this stuff, because as you guys already know how he reacted before to this kind of stuff, to the stuff he's going to be exposed to here, he's definitely not ready for that, because there's a lot of stuff that's going to be exposed here. So I don't think it's appropriate for Steve to be here. He still needs time, because he's not mentally there yet, right? And Chris and Liz, they weren't happy with this. They didn't take this well. It was like they almost misunderstood me, and it was like, what's your problem with Steve, Errol? Like, don't you like him? What's your problem? What is it between you and him? Why do you have a problem with Steve? Why are you against Steve? And it was, things like these were coming up on these lines, and I was like, do you know what? I'm not going to say anything else. Do what you want. So my good friend Chris said to me, look, I'm going to contact Steve. I'm going to go to his house, and I'm going to drag him out there. And I'm going to talk to him, and I'm going to bring him back. I'm going to bring him here. And I was like, Chris, if that's what you want to do, then I'm not going to stop you. How can I stop you? So in the end, that's what happened. And that's how Steve ended up coming back to St. Corona. It wasn't because he wanted to come. It was because he was summoned up. And that wasn't by me, by the way. Even Steve didn't tell the story this way, did he? He told a totally different story. But what happened was, I wasn't a fan of him coming back because I knew it was going to go to shit again, which it did. It was Liz and Chris who insisted that Steve would come back, and it was Chris who went back for Steve to convince Steve to come, and Steve came back. So that's how Steve ended up in St. Corona again. And Steve would claim in his videos that it was him, it was all Steve who did what happened there, and he's the creditor, you know, he takes all the credit for what happened there, but that wasn't the case. But anyway, what happened, and we ended up homeless, and Chris finally said, guys, I'm going back to Lynn's, I'm going back to my mum, because we got to bear in mind that Chris was only in his 20s, he's still a young kid, he's still a young child, he behaves like a wise grown man, but he's still a child. So he was like, I'm going back to my mum, fuck this shit. And I don't blame him. So it was me, Liz, and Steve again. So Steve was back in the picture again. And we were homeless. So what happened was, Liz had a friend. So we basically gate crashed their house, and we said, look, we've got nowhere to stay. Can we stay here until we find somewhere? And she was like, okay. So we crashed their house and took over the gaff, which was obviously better than going back to the mountains again. This time, not alone, but with Liz and Steve to carry as well. So we ended up in Liz's friend's house for a while, until they had a fallout because of Steve again, and we got kicked out and she lost a friend. And then we were homeless again. So, but Steve had a lot of money coming in from the donations for the Gnostic takeover, because we had a story to tell. So we had a lot of money accumulated just from donations. So Steve said, don't worry guys, we're going to find a hotel, and we're going to check into a hotel and all this stuff. And Liz and I were trying to say to him, look Steve, instead of paying like 100, 150 euros a day just for one room, just for accommodation, for hotels, why don't we hire a house to stay for like 500-600 euros a month, instead of paying 100, 150 euros a day. And that didn't even include our food that we were spending in the hotel that we were staying. Being the way Steve is, everything has to be his way. So he didn't like the fact that we opposed him. He perceived that as a challenge to his ego, yeah? That we were trying to control him and this and that. And we were like, okay, Steve, okay, we go to the hotel. So that hotel was costing us like 250, 300 euros of Gnostic takeover money from the donations the channel was making. But the channel wasn't mine, the channel was Steve's anyway. So I was just riding along with Steve and doing the videos for his channel with him. And every time I came back together with Steve and I was doing videos with Steve, the donations through the Patreon was always on the rise. There was a point, we were receiving like 10,000 euros, 15,000 euros a month just through donations. Every time I got back together with Steve, Whenever there was a split between me and Steve, and I was out of the picture, and I was no longer on gnostic takeover, and I was the bad guy again, the donations used to go down to like $2 grand, $1 grand, 500 quid a month. And then when I used to come back into the picture, boom, up again. Well, this says something. So finally what happened was, you know, I don't like talking behind people's backs, okay? And I definitely don't like talking about people, especially when they may not even be among us anymore to defend themselves. So I'm pretty much going to leave it there, but what I can say was he wasn't a good guy. He wasn't a good guy. I watched him over the months and years destroy so many good people, so many good people's lives. He had so many good people around him. If he truly understood their value, instead of competing with them, with his ego, and if he were to collaborate with them and learn from them and work with them together properly, he would be very well off right now. He would be in a very good place right now, and he will still be here. But unfortunately, he wasn't that type of a person. I'll just leave it there. Especially after seeing what he did to me. But I'm not a victim though. I'll get up and I'll move on. But whatever happens, he's always the victim. I go to prison, he's the victim. I get deported, he's the victim. I get a ban, I can't travel anywhere, he's the victim. He's the victim, I'm the perpetrator. Everything is in inverse. So that's exactly what happened finally. Steve ended up listening to us because he started to come to his senses and realize that it's more economically viable to hire a house, pay monthly rent for a house, than to stay in a hotel, which was just one poxy room. The four of us were staying in. Liz had a kid with her as well, little Leonie. So it was the four of us. And we moved into a house in the end. And my God, eventually 2022 came along, and Steve was insisting that we do a ceremony. Just me and him. He wanted to do a ceremony. And I was like, you know what, Steve, let's do it. So we did a ceremony, and that was the last ceremony we ever did. 2 days after the ceremony, I was arrested anyway. So we did one last ceremony with Steve. I was literally sitting in ceremony, watching Steve suffering and burning in his own hell, being tormented by his own thoughts. And there was nothing I can do for him but just sit there and keep him close to me, constantly assuring him that I'm here. And he was so under attack in that ceremony from his own thoughts that he was being exposed to immense amount of radiation from Saturn. He was, I could see the Saturn energy coming in and pelting him, and he couldn't even get up. He couldn't stand up on his feet. He has so much pressure on him because he was being so immensely radiated. there was nothing I can do for him. Like, he was right in front of me almost. And I wasn't feeling what he was feeling, but he was feeling it. He was the one who was being exposed to this level of radiation, but I was there as well, and I was perfectly fine. And in the end, he said to me, Errol, I need to get out of here. I need to go out. And I said to him, Steve, we can't go out now, yeah? In ceremony, we don't leave the ceremony space. It's not safe to do so. If we go out, you're going to lose your mind, Steve, because the things you're going to see out there, you're going to lose your mind. Now's not the time to go out. And it was like it was going through him. He wouldn't listen to me. So what happened was, he got up anyway. He somehow managed to get up. He put his coat on, and he can barely stand there. And he's making his way to the door, and he's looking at me. And then he just went out the door, so I had to go out with him. I couldn't leave him on his own. I had to assist him. And we started walking. And this is like a village, an Austrian village, late at night. No one around, obviously, a few houses in the village. And we're walking out away from the village. There's only one road anyway, which leads in and out of the village. So we're walking along that road now, and we left the village. So now we're in the middle of nowhere, it's just darkness. And Steve says to me, I feel a little bit better, but it's still, I'm going crazy. What's going on? And a lot of things began to happen around us, which I can't go into detail now, because a portal was open. We're in ceremony, all right? That's why I said to Steve, we can't go out now, it's not safe. And we were seeing things, and he wasn't really responding well to what he was seeing. And at one point there was even a helicopter which came, and it hovered over us, and it was following us all the way, and many other things took place as well, which I can't talk about here on YouTube. I may put in my book. You know, there's many things that I want to talk about, but I know that it's not the time yet, because two reasons. One reason is that humanity is not ready yet, and this is not a superiority complex thing. It's just a fact. Humanity is not ready yet. That's number one. And number two is, if I do, who's going to be there for me when they come for me? Nobody. So why would I? Why should I? Right? So I'm trying to hold myself here. All I can say is we saw some things. Steve and I saw some things which normally we don't see. So he said to me, I want to go back home, and I just want to lay down because I can't stand this shit anymore. What's going on? He said to me, what's going on? He kept on asking me, what's going on? I said to him, Steve, don't worry. I'll explain to you in the morning, but for now, you can't think about it, I said to him. I'll explain to you in the morning. Let's go home now. Went back home, lay him down, and for the rest of the night, throughout the whole ceremony, I just had to be there in front of him, reassuring him. And all he can do was just constantly ask me, Errol, I need to ask you a question. Are you working for the devil? And I kept on saying to him, no, Steve, I don't. Because of the stuff he saw, obviously. So eventually, the porthole closed. We closed the ceremony, and everything came back to normal, and Steve started feeling better again. And then we can sit down, and we can normally have a conversation. So then we started to talk, and everything was okay again. And life was back to normal. And the next day, we went for a walk. Liz joined us as well. And things were totally different. And at one point we were met by farmers with guard dogs, and they were pretty hostile towards us. And helicopters were following us. And I just knew something changed, you know, in something. We tweaked something with that ceremony. There was a change in the environment, in the atmosphere. So what happened was, 2 days later, we decided, for some stupid reason, to go to Vienna because they wanted to do some shopping, as if there were no shops in the next village. They wanted to go to Vienna, so we're like, all right then. So we got in the car, we're driving, we come on the motorway, police started following us. They pulled us over. They obviously asked for IDs and everything, and sooner or later it was clear that who I was, and they arrested me. So I was out of the picture, I was gone, I was arrested. And I went to prison. And you know, when I went to prison, the police gave me a 10-hour interview. And the questions, the nature of the questions they asked, I can't get into detail in this video, but I'll probably talk about them another time, but I'm not going to talk about them now. But the nature of the questions, some of the questions they asked me, and now just imagine 10-hour interrogation, question after question after question after question. I'm not going to talk about the nature of the questions now, but just use your imagination. They were asking me some detailed stuff. And you know when somebody questions you, right? They're actually revealing things about themselves. They're telling about themselves to you. Because when you question someone, when you ask people questions, you're only asking them questions based on your interests. So if you're interested about something, you're asking a question about that something that you're interested in. So the person who's being asked a question automatically knows that you're interested. So, that's interesting, isn't it? Why would you be interested in something like that if it were not real? So the government, the establishment was revealing a lot of things to me about themselves in the form of projection, in the form of questioning me. Because what we've got to understand is, when we are being questioned as a person, we are in charge, we are the authority, which is the reason why we're being questioned in the first place. So you're in charge, you're being questioned, the ball's in your court, my friend. You're in charge. You're in command right there. You're in an authoritarian position, which is the reason why you're being questioned. Does this make any sense to you? So that was a 10-hour interview, and I spent some time in prison in Austria for nothing. And at the end of it, what happened was I was deported. But the way they deported me was very strange. They hired a jet just for me. Like, they had 3 elite forces officers take me to the plane in a black Mercedes van with tinted windows. And when we got to the plane, there was like a group of people surrounding the plane. And I was thinking to myself, who are all these people? And it turns out that it's it was the higher-ups in the establishment, and they were there, waiting for me, to make sure that I board that plane, I get the hell out of Austria, and I go back to England. And that's what happened. So I boarded the plane with the 3 officers, and they accompanied me all the way back to England. And we landed in Heathrow, and we went through the checks and everything. And then they turned around and they said to me, "You're a free man. Good luck." And he just disappeared. And then I was back in England. I was standing in Heathrow Airport, and it was my family who came and picked me up from the airport, because I called them straight away. And it was a weird time. It was all of a sudden, like after all that, after being a fugitive, living in the Alps, and then being imprisoned, and going through all of that, and then all of a sudden, I'm there in Heathrow Airport again. It was like, it almost felt like I woke up from a dream, and I'm back down into another dream, the dream I began with, because it's all a dream. It's all a dream anyway. So it took me many months and years to recover from all of that, because the banks closed all my accounts. I couldn't open up any accounts with any banks. Social media wouldn't. I opened up a TikTok, opened up a YouTube, boom, they shut me down immediately. So I don't know what's going to happen with this. But finally now, I'm able to open some bank accounts with some banks. For example, I was able to get an account with Chase. But the first bank I was able to finally get an account was with Metro Bank. And that was just a bog standard account, just so that my wages can go into my account from my employer. So I had to start up with a base bottom line average job and build my way up again. So I basically took on the very first job I can find, and I used the money from that to do a course to qualify as a tower crane driver, so I can use the cranes on the construction sites. So I did that for a long time, and that was actually one of the best jobs that I've done so far, depending on the shifts that I used to do. I used to get paid between $4,000 and $5,000 a month, it's not bad for a job. If you're working for someone else, that is a good salary, because the rest of the jobs, they're really crap. You're looking at $1.5, maximum $2,000 a month, and there I was getting paid $4,500, $5,000 a month. So I used that money to build myself, and while I was doing that, I built myself an online business. That would be www.144kaya.com, 144kaya.com. So that's a distribution franchise business, which is basically affiliate marketing. We do very high ticket products. So I've been building that business ever since, and that's going really, really well. So what I'm saying is, after going through all of that, I've managed to build myself up. And today, I can say, thank God, I'm all good again. And this is the lesson I've learned. You can't help people unless they come to you and ask you for help. The problem we have is we're too arrogant and we think that we've got to save the world. It's not our duty to save the world. The world doesn't need saving from itself. Trust me. Our only responsibility is to focus on ourselves and the people who love us, which is our families, and work on ourselves and become a better and better version of ourselves constantly. And that's the only way we can help others, by inspiring them when they see us doing it. That's what I learned through this process. I sacrificed myself for humanity with what I did. But what I realized was that's not the way to go. Who was I to think that I'm here to save the world? The world doesn't want to be saved, my friend. The world is happy the way it is. It's not my responsibility to save the world. My responsibility is myself. It begins right here. Yeah? And it's the same for everybody. The moment everybody takes responsibility for themselves, it's finished, it's game over. Nobody's going to need saving anymore then, are they? That's it. Natural law principle says everybody is responsible for themselves. And those who fail to take responsibility for themselves, they bear the consequences. That's it. It's a cause and effect reality. We reap what we sow. And it's as simple as that. And it's not for me to tell people how it is, and how they should do things, and what they should do, what they shouldn't do. Who am I to tell people that? No. The only thing I can do is focus on myself and keep building myself, keep building my character, keep building my strength, keep building my business, keep getting better and better, becoming a better and better person. And that's the only way I can help other people. Because when other people see me do that, they become inspired. Yes, a lot of them are going to become jealous and envious at first. They're going to hate. That's part of the process. But that's because they become inspired. So that's the only thing we can do. We're not here to save the world. Believe me, the world doesn't need saving. The world is doing fine, okay? The world as we know it is no longer going to exist in the form that it does in the future anyway. Because the old paradigm is going to perish. And the new paradigm is going to be the one that's going to go on to exist in a new and improved version of itself. It's like, if you know what the mitosis of a cell is, mitosis of a cell, it's when an old cell is dying, a new cell is generated and birthed from the process of the old cell dying. So a new cell is born from the old one, and the old one dies, and a new one goes on to exist in a healthy and a more improved, upgraded version of the old one, right? And that's exactly what's happening with the planet right now. The old world is dying, so let it fall, let it die. Let it die. Why are we trying to save it? It's their world, it's not our world. Our world is what's coming through us. It's not coming from out there, it's coming through us. And this is what I used to talk about as the new signal. On the Gnostic Takeover, Steve and I used to talk about how there was a new signal coming in, and that signal is coming through us. Well, that's the signal, the frequency of the new paradigm, which is coming in from the source of creation, and is coming through the creation. And since we are a part of the creation as well, it's also coming through us. And I talked about this stuff a lot. So, yeah, I think I pretty much spoken about a lot of things here. Almost losing track. You know, it's sad to see that after all that we've done on the Gnostic Takeover, there's only 2 people left remaining who are asking about what happened to the Gnostic takeover, what happened to Steve. There's only 2 people left on the Gnostic takeover who are actually interested in where Steve is and how Steve is, who are concerned. So this is another prime example of how when you put your neck out there for other people, when you sacrifice yourself for other people, nobody cares. So my advice to you all is focus on stake at hand. Focus on what's on your plate right now, what's in front of you. Take things one step at a time, beginning with your own problems. You cannot solve other people's problems. You cannot solve the problems of the world when you have problems to solve in your own life. And Steve was one of those people. I'm not perfect. Me as well. I learned my lesson. And I moved on. I could have been a victim of what happened as well, just like Steve, and played the victim and perished. But I didn't. I chose to stand up, to get up, and to learn my lesson and to continue as an improved version of myself. So I'm not that same person I was back in 2020, 2021, when I was on Gnostic Takeover. I'm not that same person anymore. But guess what? I'm still me. And I always will be. So thank you very much for listening, and